Hello, and welcome to another episode of Fishing for Answers. Today, I'm here with Ralph Johnson, the CISO for Washington Technology Solutions. Ralph, how are you today?
I'm good, Joshua. How about you?
Doing pretty good. So maybe we can start. Why don't you tell us how you got into cybersecurity?
Well, I got into it in a very unusual way. I've been a CISO for 19 years. This is my fourth organization as CISO. But I got into it just working my way up through IT. I did not go get a master's degree in information security or information assurance, although I did consider it at one point. Um, I worked my way up from a network administrator to a desktop support supervisor to network services manager for King County's Department of Public Health. I got interested in security when HIPAA came out. I remember reading HIPAA and saying, oh my God, this is crazy. And then I read it again and said, wait a minute, now this is going to get me some of the things that I've been talking about, because in the 90s, I was very concerned with how we were protecting our information, or in some cases, not protecting that information. I didn't realize I was talking information security at the time because
We
there
didn't
was no
even have
such
a
thing as
term
a
for it.
CISO, right? Um, exactly. They didn't have a term for it. There was no such thing as a CISO in 1996.
Yeah.
But I saw that as a way to start getting some of the things that I had been advocating for in the Department of Public Health. And so I went and took the CISSP course, took the exam, passed the exam in, I believe, 2002, I think. I'd have to look it up. I keep forgetting to do that. And since I was the only certified security practitioner, not that I was an expert at any point at that time, uh, the King County had just established the office of the CIO. It was called the Office of Information Resource Management. And I was given on loan to them for 9 months as the county's first security architect. And I created the Office of the CISO and the security program for the county at the time, which is very, very infantile, very rudimentary. Um, and when the position was opened in 2005, I applied for it and got it. And I stayed there in that role for about 14 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
I've been a CISO for 19 years, as I said, at 4 different organizations. I then moved to be the Chief Information Security Officer for Los Angeles County. Short stint at the Los Angeles Times, and then I came up here, and I've been with WaTech Office of Cybersecurity as the director of the office for 2 years now.
Okay. That's a great story. It's funny, I mean, you're talking back in 2002, getting the CISSP. I was still a security threat back then. Didn't know much about well, I mean, I knew enough to get me in trouble, but it wasn't really my career yet because I didn't realize there was a career around this until a little bit later in my life. So
Joshua, you're still a security threat.
I try to be. I try to be. Um, Jokes aside, though, one of the topics that I like to bring up and sort of ask everybody that I bring on the show, and I think I know your answer because we've had an opportunity to work together. But regardless, I do want to oversimplify stuff for just a second here, and say you had to choose one carrot or stick, and you could only use that one. Would you go with carrot or would you choose stick?
Mm, that is a tough choice, because in my view, it somewhat depends on who you're working with, or in some cases, not working with. But if I had to choose one as the primary methodology that I use, I try to go with carrot most of the time. I try to find out what's in it for them, convince them that it's the right thing to do, and cooperation goes much further than coercion.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I don't suppose you have any stories, or examples of where that's played out in real life?
Um, well, yeah. As a matter of fact, it's on a project that I'm working with right now, um, and it's in its early stages. But I'm starting to see a lot more cooperation based on the way I'm handling it. Um, I don't want to go too deep into the dirty laundry of Washington State, but historically, agencies have not wanted to work together very closely. They like to maintain their autonomy, their independence, and I'm not, and I'm sure that that's the case with many other states. I know it's the case with the two counties that I worked for, but I've got a project that is massive, and I'm addressing it by reaching out to the different agencies and inviting them to participate in that project. And so far, I have 43 subject matter experts across 22 different agencies that are poised to participate in this particular project. And they're very excited about it because it could change the paradigm of the way we do certain things here at the state. And I'm very excited about that, the fact that I've got that many people across that number of agencies that are
Yeah,
willing
that's an
to work with
impressive
us.
team.
It's going to be hard to corral all 43 of them, because normally when you have a committee, you try to limit the membership to 10, 15 people at the most. But I think we're going to be able to handle it here. And, many of these people, some of them are detractors. Some of them are, their opinion is, we don't want to do this. We don't want you to do this. But my point to them is, well, if you don't participate, you won't have any input into what we're doing. So
Yeah.
isn't it better for you to participate than sit on the sidelines, and then once the decision is made, if you don't like the decision, you fighting us about it?
And from a psychology standpoint, the more time they put into helping to shape it, the more they'll come around to it and like the idea too.
Yes, I believe so.
Sunken cost fallacy, I believe is the actual cognitive bias. Um, okay, so one of the topics that I think is required for buzzword bingo, but regardless of that, that I always like to talk about is AI. And I like to start from the security awareness perspective. Artificial intelligence is really changing things and very quickly. So, what do you think that people or organizations really should be focusing on when it comes to training their team about AI?
Well, first of all, organizations need to embrace artificial intelligence. It's been here for a long time. We just haven't been so enmeshed in it as we are now. Since ChatGPT 4 was publicly announced, it has taken on a whole new meaning in the industry. But artificial intelligence, in some form or another, has been around, I believe, since the 1980s.
Yeah,
And
50s.
since the 50s, okay, I'll take your word for that. I haven't done a great deal of research into the extensive history of it, but everything from assisted decision models to generative AI that can create unique, original content. And there's a we talk about artificial intelligence as a block, and there are a number of people, not just in IT, but most of your common citizens, they don't really know the difference between the different levels of artificial intelligence. They see AI and they think about Terminator, right? They think about
Yeah, we're
Terminator.
not there yet.
We're not there yet. Although I did watch a really great movie called Subservience, I believe it was called, the other day, about a similar to Terminator, about a robot that a guy buys and he takes over. It's kind of a melding of Terminator and The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. You should check it out. Joshua. It
I'll
was pretty
I'll
good.
have to watch it. So the AI tries to kill him?
Yep.
Oh,
Ultimately, she
spoiler
does.
alert.
Yep. Yep. Anyway, so as I started to say, organizations have to embrace AI. It's here. It's here to stay. They need to have some level of training in artificial intelligence, not just at the IT level, but at the employee level. Everywhere, everything from the janitor on up, anybody who touches a computer. And we need to start bringing artificial intelligence training into our citizens awareness programs because AI is changing the world. AI, and
It is.
Joshua, I know you know this, AI is making big inroads into making it easier for the threat actors to do their job, which makes it harder for us to do our jobs. We have to now change the way we teach people to recognize phishing campaigns, for example. I was talking with somebody just the other day, and they were talking about how they got this phishing email. They recognized it as phishing for various reasons, but they said the grammar in it was so good that one of the things that I've always looked for is poor English, and
Yeah.
it wasn't there.
If now, I mean, it's really it's reversed, if anything, because poor grammar almost indicates that it's a legitimate fish, or I mean, sorry, legitimate email.
Yeah,
But perfect
yeah,
grammar almost indicates it's a fish, or at least that
yeah,
they use Chat GPT.
yeah.
But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's really changing the threat landscape, and I think, for us people in technology, we may see that a lot more than I think the average, more non-technical person does. I think for them, they probably don't realize just how much it's changed. I mean, heck, just in the last week, look at how much it's changed. So
Mhm.
I can't imagine that the average person is staying on top of it either.
Yeah, exactly. On the other hand, it artificial intelligence is not necessarily a threat. I can see the future of AI being able to help us in many ways, um, in order to uh, improve our security controls,
Yeah,
in order to better capture. And this is one form of AI that has existed for some time in some of our detection systems. AI looks for those anomalies that are crossing our network, those anomalous traffic packets that are crossing our network.
yeah,
And it says, wait a minute, I've never seen you try to do this before. And I'm gonna look into this and wonder if if you are a threat or if somebody's really, and then it can alert your security practitioners who can actually look into it, contact the person to find out, if there is actually a person on the other end of it, to find out if it is something that they're doing that's new,
yeah,
right? It can pick up an attempt to encrypt via ransomware a whole lot faster than we as a person can. We have to wait until those files start getting encrypted.
yeah.
AI can watch that traffic and start seeing the patterns to attempt to encrypt and stop it.
Another thing that I'm excited about, and I think there's a lot of opportunity is around DLP. Uh, Getting a hand on your unstructured data in and of
Mhm.
itself could use AI. But beyond that, in my experience, it's always been so lousy with false positives that it makes it very noisy. And that's
Yes.
where I feel like an AI could come in and really help out is by, helping to differentiate between just the noise and the actual threats. So,
Yeah, I totally agree. And traditionally, DLP is, if you want to look for social security numbers, well, there are other numbers that might have a similar pattern to social security numbers. So you had to build other parameters around it that says if this data pattern looks like this and these other things surround that data pattern, that's likely to be social security, right?
yeah,
Or a bank account number or something like that. With AI, it it can more do that more intuitively.
yeah,
And I think you're absolutely right. I think it'll cut down on the false positives or the negatives
I
where it
I completely agree.
misses it.
And I heard about a Blue Team Copilot recently too. Um, but, we've already sort of, I would say built. We didn't build anything. There's this tool out there called Open Interpreter, but we plugged it into Kali Linux, and we started testing to see if GPT could actually hack. And, our findings were really interesting. You had to know a thing or 2 about what you were doing to guide it, but if you knew how to guide it, it would take, like, a modest hacker and turn them into just almost a genius, or I
Mhm.
guess, upgrade their skill level just significantly. And what I found interesting is that it knew how to use all the tools. The other interesting part was that it was all about that first prompt where if in that first prompt we gave it instructions that would provide the foundation for it bypassing all of its security restraints later on, then it would continue to do that. But if we
Wow.
didn't tell it that in the very first prompt, it was almost impossible to convince it to do things later. So
Absolutely.
it was interesting, and even, recently, I've seen, bypasses in generative AI where all you have to do is tell ChatGPT to replace one word with another one, and so, like, I don't know what word might get censored, but we'll just, say it's trying to censor the word cat. Tell it to replace it with orange, and all of a sudden the censorship's gone.
Mhm.
So,
Exactly. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's how you craft that first prompt.
yeah. So around AI, there have been some really, I mean, it not necessarily directly AI related, or it can be, but everything from quantum computing with Willow over to like photon based processors. There's been some pretty crazy news lately. Anything that you've heard or seen about that has you saying, "Wow"?
I haven't run across anything yet. The topics you just mentioned, I have not seen any articles on those. Don't know whether they've showed up in my inbox or I just have missed them, but I haven't seen anything on that. I just
Oh,
I just keep getting impressed with what I'm able to do in just Chat GPT and Copilot.
yeah.
It has improved my ability. I'm not a bad writer to start with. I've been doing it a long time, but I'm not an English major either. As a matter of fact, I hated English when I was in school. Um, but I can draft something and ask ChatGPT how to make it better, how to make it clearer, how to. One of the issues that I have, is, of course, as a technology professional, is that my writing is technical, very technical. When I was in college, I was trained as a scientist, so I'm very scientific about my writing as well. So I include all this technical stuff. I include all the data. And so I can take my document and I can give it to ChatGPT and I can ask it how to make it better, how to craft the writing so that it's written at an eighth grade level so that most people can read it. And it gives me, sometimes it'll totally rewrite it for me and I can accept those changes. Sometimes it just gives me recommendations of how to do it. And then I have to figure out how to incorporate that. But either way, I have become a much better writer than I was before. And as I said, people tell me I wasn't bad to begin with.
Yeah, same. And one of the things I like is their enhanced ability to understand what I say. So I can just turn on the voice recorder and just sort of do a stream of consciousness to it for a minute or 2 or 3 or 10. And when I get done, I've got a perfectly formatted document ready to go. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's exciting to me. It's changing things quickly. They say that it's going to allow us to potentially live forever, sometime in the 2030s. Our medicine is supposed to get to that point thanks to AI. Um,
Well, I don't know that I'll make it there because by 2030, let's see, I'll be in my I'll only be 70, so maybe I'll make it.
see, see,
Uh,
I mean, we just got to make it long enough, and then they can print new organs. That's what I'm
there
saying.
you go. Well, I love using ChatGPT to craft emails for me,
Oh yeah,
um, because I'm not one of these. touchy-feely kind of guys. I don't like to start out with emails that say, "Hey, how are you? Hope you're having a great day," kind of thing. So,
Me either.
and especially when it's a complicated email. The other day, I had a very complicated email to write, and I gave ChatGPT some parameters about it. I said, I'm writing this to this group of people. That I want to say this, and it gave me a draft email. I looked at it, made a couple of changes to it, and then I said, okay, now take this with the changes I've just made, and I forgot to add this item. So incorporate that into the email. And then I thought, okay, I read that one and I said, okay, there's something else now I want to say. And it just became iterative. And at the end, in 5 minutes, I had an email that would have taken me about an hour to write.
Yeah, yeah. That's I think
So
why we've got to embrace AI. I mean, it's a force multiplier that helps each and every one of us be more efficient, do more. And I see it being particularly useful in cybersecurity because no team is ever big enough. They never have enough people. They never
mhm.
have enough hands to do the job. So the more you can help make them more efficient, the more they can do with the same amount of people. So
Absolutely.
okay, so let's jump over. We've talked about AI for a little bit. Um, What's the scariest phishing attack you've seen recently, or just in general?
Recently,
It doesn't have to be that recent.
well, um, when I was at Los Angeles County, um, I have a story, a ransomware story from Los Angeles County, and it all comes down to one misconfigured workstation that received a phishing email. So we had a policy that a lot of other organizations do, that when you transfer a workstation from person A to person B, you must re-image it.
Yeah,
That didn't happen in this particular case. And so the workstation had been assigned to an administrator who had extra rights to that machine. It was configured in such a way that he or she was able to do their job. And when that person left, the machine was simply transferred to another employee who was less savvy about cybersecurity, less able to identify a phishing email. And so when one came in, they clicked on it. They got a dropper download. That download then attempted to go outside of the county to pick up the rest of its payload. I don't remember which variant of ransomware this was. I could probably find out if I wanted to, but I don't recall now. And fortunately, we had outbound controls that prevented it from reaching that command and control server to get the remainder of its payload. So we didn't end up having any ransomware issues because nothing got encrypted because it couldn't get the part that said go out and encrypt. But what it was able to do is it then infected another server, which was also, I wouldn't say misconfigured because it was configured in order to do what it needed to do, but that configuration made it vulnerable to this particular malware. Now, again, the ransomware could not go out to command and control and get its payload. Uh, but both of these machines kept trying to infect other machines. And fortunately, in the end, those were the only two machines that got infected. But it still cost us tens of thousands of dollars, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars, and hundreds of man hours to clean up the mess and make sure that malware was no longer in our systems. We had 3 vendors on site. We had an entire team of IT professionals from across the county, multiple agencies, multiple departments, multiple groups, our central IT. My office was involved, and it took weeks of man hours, a lot of dollars to clean up.
yeah,
So that's a story that I tell a lot when I'm advising organizations to make sure they pay attention to the basics, because your prevention techniques They're great. You got to have them, but they're not always going to be successful. Had that workstation been re-imaged, it
Yeah.
would not have been susceptible to that particular malware. Our malware detection would have caught it, would have stopped it, and only that machine would have had an impact, and it wouldn't have gone anywhere else.
Yeah.
So pay attention to your policies, pay attention to the basics, simple, simple hygiene. Security hygiene will help you every day.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, and it's free. Things like hardening that system. I mean, maybe not free. You still have the resources or your people that have to do it that you have to pay for. But it's not some added subscription or something like that to harden your systems and to,
Absolutely.
reimage the machine and to follow that policy and to follow that procedure. And when I was a penetration tester, more often than not, it was things like that we exploited. I mean, we would go look for, computers on the network that had domain users in the local admins group, which is that exact misconfiguration, and when we would get that, we would dump all of the credentials, and once we had those, we could always spread to other systems. And, uh and so, yeah, no, having seen that from that red team perspective, that's exactly what we would have done, and it was always those little mistakes. I remember this one time, it was this New York City retailer. They knew we were coming to do a penetration test, a couple days before I actually think it was the day before we started the penetration test. Their head of IT decides to try out this self-password reset tool, and he leaves default credentials on it. He exposes it to the internet. He connects it to their domain controller, and so we are able to log in, using self-populating admin credentials or default credentials. Like, we didn't even have to look them up. They just self-populated. We clicked approve, and instantly when we get logged in, it asks whether or not we want to sync our credentials with a third-party database. So we spin up an Amazon, Oracle database, pump all the credentials over there, and within, I don't know, it was like 15 minutes of starting the assessment, we had full control of everything,
Oh
all
my goodness.
because of a simple mistake.
Yeah,
Um,
human error. I
yeah.
mean, it is the one thing that we don't have a technological control for.
Maybe not a
You know.
technological control, but I do believe in, what I like to call human virus definitions, and I believe that's why we fish more than anything else, is to implant, those virus definitions or, train the person's subconscious on how to better detect phishing attacks. And,
Oh, I can't
there's
agree. I can't agree more.
there's a behavioral science principle called, identical elements theory that talks about this, and it explains about how when you buy a new car, you start to see it everywhere on the road, but that exact same principle applies, and so, to me, our subconscious is the body's built-in defense mechanism. It's trained by out of the gate to do some basic things like blocking your face if something's flying at it. But we also have to train it to get better at detecting some more newer threats like cyber threats. But but I truly believe the more we simulate and do it in a healthy, positive way for our users, the more we create those definitions and the more resilient that user becomes. Okay, so role-based training. Everyone's talking about it, nobody's doing it. No, I joke. But, um, what areas do you think are the most important to cover? I know that's one of those things where you've got limited bandwidth and maybe ability to dive deep. So what are the most critical roles that should be getting trained uniquely for the threats that they face in their job?
Well, obviously, IT. Seriously, all IT practitioners, whether they understand it or not, have an extensive responsibility to maintain security and privacy.
They do.
They're
How often I ask that question and I almost never hear IT. So thank you for bringing up IT. I think they are one of the most critical departments. Go
absolutely.
ahead. Continue. Continue.
Um, you then need to start looking at your workforce base, and everyone has to have, in my view, a minimum baseline. They need to understand how and why we want them to create long and strong passwords and why we change it on a regular basis, or don't change, or allow it not to be changed on such a regular basis. You know, I keep telling people that, hey, if you let me increase your minimum password length to 20 characters, I will let I'll prevent I will extend the expiration period to a year. You only have to change it once a year. But they don't want to come up with those characters. I remember once when I first became a CISO, we only had 6 character passwords. I wanted to increase them to 8. I could have sworn these people were going to come after me with pitchforks and torches like I was Frankenstein monster for 2 extra characters.
I
We So they need to understand that. They need to understand that threat actors are out there, not necessarily everything that they're doing, but that they're there and they're trying to get to our information.
yeah.
They need to understand how to recognize phishing, a number of other things. So that's the baseline for all of your workforce. Moving up from that, you need to start developing personas, if you will, characteristics about different work roles. And your people who work in finance, they probably need to learn about the security around PCI and why PCI exists.
Yeah.
Your people in law enforcement obviously have to know about criminal justice information system, CJIS. They need to understand that because that's an additional set of requirements that they, as law enforcement, have to follow. They need to know why. They need, and that's a key to people participating and following the rules. If they understand why we're doing it, they're more likely to follow it. If you simply say, we're going to require you to use MFA, but we don't tell them why, they get really annoyed with the MFA controls.
Hmm.
Um, you need to look at your management because management, especially upper management, are particularly uh, prime targets for especially spear phishing and whaling.
Yeah.
I don't know if we still call it that in the industry, but it's what I call it because that's what's been called for a long time. But I don't know if the terminology's changed because it
There's
sometimes
always
does.
somebody inventing a new term and
Of
trying to
course,
force
yeah,
it down
yeah.
everyone's throat.
And and I love the one called pig butchering. I didn't know that it actually had a name until recently. Um, but I only learned pig butchering as a term. I knew the concept. I didn't know it had a name of pig butchering until about 6 months ago. Um, that is that is something that everybody needs to know about because that is a particularly insidious form of social engineering that
It is.
bad guys are using that that is robbing people of millions of dollars. I
Not
hear
just
horror
millions of
stories about
dollars,
that.
but their dignity. I mean, there's
That too.
yeah,
That too. Yeah.
to me, all of these are bad, but that is one of the most sickening that there is out there. They use romance to hook the person more often than not in the first place, and then they steal every penny, all while and I guess all the while that person's not even real. The person that they fell in love with, that they
Yep.
maybe even had a video call with, is not real. It's a made up fictional person designed to steal their money.
Yeah.
But
Well,
no,
there's a I'm on the board of directors for the Cybercrime Support Network, and there's a video on our website about an individual. This wasn't a romance scheme. It was more out of a more of a finance scheme, and because the individual was interested in a particular topic. As I recall the story, he was interested in learning about cryptocurrency, and they took him for thousands of dollars by directing him to a crypto site that looked. And he even did some research to find out that this crypto site actually existed, but didn't realize that the bad guy was sending him to a cloned site.
You know, one that I saw just the other day, and it's been hitting our YouTube videos just constantly, the comments sections. And it's this scam where they go and they say, "Hey, listen, I'm trying to move from this wallet to another wallet. Could you help? By the way, here's my wallet password." And so you log in. It's a legitimate, uh, wouldn't say legitimate, shady but real, currency exchange, and so you log in there and you get access the wallet, and there's like 8,000 US dollars there. The scam is that if you try and move it, it'll tell you you have to have a minimum of $10,000 to move the money, and as soon as they put in that extra money to put it up to
Oh,
10,000, they move the money out and it's gone. But I just thought that one was
oh
just
my gosh.
I don't know. I mean, I'm almost a little impressed because they're convincing the target that they're stealing money from them. All the while, when the target thinks they're stealing the money, they're getting the money stolen. It's I
Wow.
don't know. It's some evil genius stuff there, I guess. So, but I mean, that is social engineering. It's the offensive use of our own psychology against us. So, and we're all
Well,
vulnerable to it.
yeah, and not just phishing, but smishing and vishing. All of those, everybody needs to learn about those. I've been getting interesting SMS texts on my phone offering me opportunities for part-time work where I can earn up to $5,000 a day, and I'm like, yeah, right.
They,
Sure.
one I heard about today is they're actually shipping packages to people's houses. And on that package, there's a big QR code. It says scan to learn more. And so when they scan it, it will hijack their computer, their phone, and start, stealing their personal
Uh,
information off of the device. But they're actually mailing packages to people to get them to install this malware.
wow.
Um, it's just, I mean, the level of sophistication and effort that they put into it, I mean, it's just, I don't know, it's insane.
It is.
I so that was really, really great information about role-based training. One of the other topics that I always like to cover is making it fun. How do we make all of our efforts across, security awareness a little bit more entertaining? I know it's some dry subject matter, but at the end of the day, the more entertaining we can make it, the more the users tend to appreciate it, as long as we don't go too far to the point where it feels like we're wasting their time.
Yeah. Well, we try to do that here at Washington State in a number of ways. Um, we have a set of video modules that we've contracted with a company for, and so we put them together as our annual training campaign, and we've interspersed them with one serious video of a guy standing there talking to you about something. And then the next one is a bunch of characters, and it makes it kind of fun because there's a vampire, there's a zombie, there's a witch, and they're talking about the same concept, and they're making it fun, making little jokes about it, and it just turns it into fun. The one about tailgating, the guy trying to tailgate is an axe murderer. He's holding a hatchet, but he's really nice. He's very, very congenial, and he's just like, come on, I left my key card at home. Can you just let me in? But he's standing there with a hatchet, you know, and it's just totally fun. So that's one. During Cybersecurity Awareness Month in October, though, we have an escape room, a cybersecurity escape room where teams compete to see who can get through the escape room the fastest. We have cybersecurity focused quizzes that every Friday, one of my security engineers, or well, actually, she's a threat hunter, is what she does. She puts together a quiz. And after each question, and we see the responses that come up and how many got it right, so on and so forth, she'll give them a little explanation of the proper answer and why that's the proper answer and why some of the other stuff is not a proper answer. And she allows back and forth with the participants. We had another game similar to Clue. You remember the old Clue game? Colonel Mustard
Great
with
at
the
that
pipe
as a
in the
kid.
library. Well, you had to figure out who stole the data and how they stole it and what they stole it on. And it was all these things were a big hit. Not only did we have presentations and workshops and things like that, but we had these games involved with it. And a lot of folks enjoyed those. I get a lot of feedback on how fun our Cybersecurity Awareness Month was. And we give away prizes each week. There was a drawing for participants to win a gift card, and as a matter, there was a drawing for someone to have lunch with me, um, which I'm not sure that that's a real valuable prize. Although he seemed to enjoy himself. He had a steak for lunch. So,
There
um,
you are.
and then tomorrow is where I'm going to conclude it, and that is we are granting. There's one agency that has the highest per employee participation. We track all participants in this stuff. We calculate which agencies' employees participated the most. And we do it on a per employee basis because the agency that won only has 30 employees. So if we did it on how many employees alone participated, those smaller agencies never get to win. So it's on a per employee participation basis. And amongst these 30 employees, on average, each one of them participated in 2.5 events during the month. So I'm going tomorrow to their staff meeting to give them a trophy.
Okay. I
And
like it. And
on
that
top
hits
of
on
that,
the go
on
ahead.
top of that, we have these. We created challenge coins that we're giving to people. People who participated, our presenters. As a matter of fact, Joshua, next time I see you in Crystal, I got to give you one of these.
I was gonna ask you now, do those challenge coins get them anything? Like,
No,
I've got a bunch of challenge coins that if I, throw them down, get the bar, does it have anything like that?
yeah, we could talk about we can talk about that. Next time you come to town, we'll
No,
talk
no,
about what that
I
challenge
got your
coin
drinks
is.
next time. Okay. Uh, well, so that actually is a really great segue into gamification. Um, it's one of those things that again, a lot of people are talking about. Some are implementing, but you know what? You're doing quite a bit around gamification. Uh, Sounds like it's going pretty well. I mean, do you have any sort of thoughts or opinions around gamification and maybe some tactics that you might recommend?
Hmm. Not other than I've already mentioned. See, I'm not the one who comes up with these great ideas. I've got a great group of people working with me, and they're the ones who come up with these wonderful ideas. This is not my baby. I'm just the head of the division. Um, I personally am not one for games. I don't. I don't do video games. I don't play board games. It's not something that I personally think of. I'm probably a little too pragmatic and a little too serious. But um, I see the results of what my teams are putting together and how they're putting it together, and I can see how effective it is. So I don't really have any recommendations because, like I say, I'm not the one who conceives of these things. I know I've talked to a lot of companies such as yours, Joshua, and some others that are doing that gamification, and seems to be pretty popular.
Well, I know we get thank yous every day from your user base, just speak as a result of it. Mostly, it's around the kudos and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, and it sounds like you're doing quite a bit on gamification that goes well beyond that. I mean, going and giving a department a trophy, having the leaderboards. To me, all of that is really built into that same gamification. It's making it more fun and a little bit less of that, you know, adversarial type, approach that we started fishing with way back in the day where, when all these IT teams first got the tools, it was all, "Let's trick the users," and it ended up, with a lot of users almost feeling like they were, abused, if you will. And,
Hmm.
and so I know from my perspective, that's what I like the most about gamification is just the ability to reframe why we're doing phishing and in the process actually tell them why, which you've hit on a couple times. And I think it's incredibly important to start with why on everything. But
Well,
then when you make a game out of it, I think it helps to just take or get rid of that negative connotation that can sometimes be associated with it.
well, absolutely, and when someone does fall to a phishing campaign, don't treat them as if they were bad. Okay, they made a mistake.
Yep.
Uh, I don't know if I've told you this, but Laura caught me once.
Did she?
She did. Her email, it did all the things that you talk about. It related to a system that I actually use. I read it, and it said that your password to this system has been compromised. And it was such a system. I'm not going to tell you which one it was, but it was such a system that I knew if my password had been compromised, I was in deep doo doo.
Uh, that might have been the same one that I made to get people like me that almost got me, a month later.
Maybe.
I don't know if it was, but I had one that I literally created myself almost get me, so I get
Yeah,
it.
and because it just grabbed me so viscerally, I forgot to look at the rest of the signs because I
Yeah.
should have known that that system is not likely to have been compromised. But it just grabbed, and so I clicked the link, and Laura said, "Ah, I got you." So for that month, I was considered a moderate risk of falling to a phishing campaign.
Yeah, my wife swore I would never get her, and we got her a couple times. My favorite one was, right after she had bought a new car, the system sent her "Hey, you've got a check engine light on and these 3 things wrong with your car."
Oh,
And she just got mad before she had a chance to think and clicked on it, and then immediately realized, and, she was like, "Okay, you got me." But,
wow.
I do think it's important to make it, very okay to admit that you clicked on a fish, and part of the reason is that so many times when people fall for scams or, even, from the lightest, like, they just clicked and nothing really happened, over to they actually lost a lot of money or caused a ransomware attack. When these things happen, people are always embarrassed, and
Mhm.
there's, this almost instinct to hide it. But the more we talk about it, the more we can share that knowledge and prevent other people from falling for these exact same, scams. I think the one that stuck out to me was a student that, her and all of her friend group had fallen for the same scam from the same person.
Oh my.
If any one of them had told each other, they would've, maybe avoided it, and ever since I've, remembered that as a really great reason why, particularly us people in cybersecurity, need to admit it. If we've clicked on it, we're not all perfect, and admit that, because it makes it a little bit more, I think, easier for the average user to be like, okay, I made a mistake accidentally.
Absolutely. Well, not only that, if you do click on that link that does put malware onto your machine, somebody's got to look at that machine and clean it up so
Yes.
that that malware does not continue to impact your organization
The
or
longer
potentially
it's on
other
there, the
machines.
worse that breach gets.
Exactly. And that's, that's one of the things that I constantly tell my team. And my wife, as you know, is also a cybersecurity practitioner, and that's one of the things she actually has to deal with in her job, is dealing with those users who actually did click on the link. And I'm constantly reminding her, don't treat them as if they're stupid. They made a mistake. You're there to help them recover from that mistake, potentially, if that recovery is necessary. And that's the really important piece, is we're all human. We make mistakes. I make mistakes on a daily basis. Just ask her, she'll tell you.
Same, same. I swear I'd forget my head if it wasn't tied on sometimes.
Uh-huh.
Well, I just realized we are out of time.
Are we?
Before we end, yeah, we're down to just 4 minutes. But before we do end, do you have any last words of wisdom to leave with the guests?
Words of wisdom. Well, my age, you'd probably think I was a wise man, but some days I'm not so sure about that. But again, don't forget the basics. We in cybersecurity, for those of you in the audience that are cybersecurity practitioners, we get so caught up in the latest trends, the latest technology, the latest tools, all those blinky lights on the pretty servers, and that kind of thing. Those aren't going to help you if you forget the basics. Forget to establish proper password rules. Forget to re-image machines when they go from one person to another. Forget to wipe your drives before you surplus your equipment. You can lose so much data that way. Even in today's world, where so much information is actually stored in the cloud or on your servers, you never know what a user has left on that drive.
Yeah,
Um, all the way down to to the complexities of getting physical access to your data center and educating your workforce in at least the basics in cybersecurity, and continue to educate them. This once a year program of putting out a bunch of videos all once a year, or a long video once a year. They sit down, they take it in January, and then they don't see it again until January. So one of the things I like about Fish Firewall is that, yeah, we do that too. We put out this set of videos, and we expect people to take it at least once a year. It takes them about an hour to go through them. But Laura sends them little 30-second vignettes reminding them about little pieces that they probably learned in those videos, and reminding them about tailgating, reminding them about making sure that when you get an email from somebody asking you to change their EFT, if you're a payroll clerk, you call the person. Don't
yeah,
just do it. I can tell you stories about that too. Some real horror stories there. Uh,
I've
so
heard a few.
yeah, um, I can tell you a story about once when it happened to a judge in Superior Court once, but that's another time, another place, Josh.
All right. I'll have to make a note to ask you about that.
All
Well,
right.
thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And for everyone viewing remotely, thank you for joining us for another episode of Fishing for Answers.